my sins?
Did you say where are your zins?
No,
Oh.
maybe. Just goes so good with coffee.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a cinematic odyssey through the 100 greatest films spanning from the roaring 1920s to the cutting-edge masterpieces of 2024. Carefully curated from the lovely people on Letterboxd. Two intrepid souls embark on a journey through a treasure trove of timeless classics and groundbreaking contemporary works, where each frame embodies the enduring magic of the silver screen. Grab your popcorn and join us on this epic expedition through a century of cinematic excellence, where every film promises to enchant, inspire, and leave an indelible mark on the soul. And now, for your listening pleasure, here are the LetterBros.
Welcome everybody to the fourth episode of LetterBros, where we let a wheel decide our destiny and what movie we're going to watch next. As always, I am Felix. I'm joined by my buddy Parker. How we doing today, buddy?
Hey, Felix. You know what? I'm doing great. Today's a great day to record a podcast episode about a long movie.
Another long movie. For those watching, this is our second over 3-hour movie in a row. Last week we got Fanny and Alexander, and then by the grace of God, we were blessed to be able to watch Lawrence of Arabia, which almost clocks in at 4 hours. I think, we actually watched, I think, two different versions.
No, I ended up watching the
3
hour and 47-minute one.
Okay, good. So then we're all up to speed. So yeah, about 3 hours and 47 minutes.
Yeah. So for those of you that did not read the podcast episode title, we are talking about Lawrence of Arabia today, which was released in 1962. It's directed by David Lean. It is an epic historical drama, and definitely this film puts emphasis on epic. Like, this is a true epic. But it's loosely based off the life of T.E. Lawrence, who was a real British officer back in World War I. He's played by Peter O'Toole, of course, of Ratatouille fame, right? And it's following T.E. Lawrence, who played a key role going against the Ottoman Empire in World War I. So there is a great cast in it. There's a lot of cool shots, like really cool desert shots. You have themes of identity, leadership, and cultural complexities at play with T.E. Lawrence really not knowing which culture he should represent more closely. He obviously feels a very close connection with the Arabs. But yeah, we had two straight films with some awesome cinematography, some awesome things to look at on the TV screen.
Honestly, you just blew my mind, because as soon as you said Peter O'Toole of Ratatouille fame, I checked out and I was like, wait, is he just messing around? So I went and Googled, and yeah, Peter O'Toole is fucking Anton Ego from Ratatouille.
Crazy, right?
I can't picture that. You're listening to and obviously it's he's ancient by the time Ratatouille is being made, but I can't hear the voice. You hear Anton Ego, and it's a very specific voice.
You know what I'm craving? A little perspective.
I can't picture that coming out of T.E. Lawrence as I'm watching Lawrence of Arabia, but that's crazy.
Yeah. If my math is correct, Ratatouille came out 45 years after Lawrence of Arabia came out.
Insane, dude.
So yeah, we kind of talk a little bit before we record about our general feelings. We usually don't know each other's ratings, but you had expressed to me that you really dug this film, and I'll leave the rest for you to say. But I'm curious. I was more lukewarm on it. I enjoyed it, and we'll get into that in a little bit with our ratings. But what did you love so much about it? Was it the visual aspects? Because it is a visually striking film, and it has an excellent score. Or was it the story? Was it the epic nature of it? What really made you enjoy it so much?
So I will preface that this movie took me 5 days to watch, only because, one, it's a long movie, but two, we have work in our life, going on in between. But I would watch bits and pieces every so often, before I go to work or after I come back from work. But this movie just hits an itch of mine that I kind of really found while watching this movie. Is I really like big epic like adventure movies. Like I love for the most part all of the Indiana Jones movies. I love Goonies, I love Dune. So and like I love like Pirates of the Caribbean, at least like the first two Pirates of the Caribbean. So like just like a sucker for just like action adventure movies, and to see me get that same feeling out of a movie coming out of like 1962 that is almost 4 hours long, but it's still keeping me engaged throughout. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. I mean, I literally Park and I at one point were watching the movie at around the same time, and we were texting each other because the movie begins with no visuals. It is 4 minutes of just the score of the movie. Like it's almost like you're watching it like as a play, which is kind of silly to say because of the grand scope of this movie, but it's like it's inviting people in and like introducing people in as they're coming in to watch this movie, and then the movie begins. And I mean, like the first act of Lawrence of Arabia is probably some of the best like cinematography, action, and just overall movie that I have ever seen in my life.
Would you say that it kind of lost your interest as it continued to go on? Because I agree. Like I think the first hour and a half, I was like, wow, this is going to be
It's
something else.
stunning. It's
Yeah.
like the Panavision, like the 70, like I wish that we
I
had
know.
the opportunity to watch this movie in 70 millimeter just because like you could tell that that was what they were going for, like,
Yes.
well, using the technology at hand, because a lot of these shots are extremely wide,
Hmm.
but like not in, but it's not in a way that's like making you visually like think like this is really weird, but like it's making you take in all of these like beautiful landscapes of Jordan and Morocco where they filmed, and it's insane. But going to your point, we hit an intermission.
So
Literally, it
the
says
intermission is like 2.5 hours into the movie.
But that's where I would say, because my first sitting, I watched it literally like from the beginning to the intermission because I was just so hooked. And then the last 3 days was like that half of the second and third act going into it, where like, you know, Lawrence starts kind of losing his mind. Like he's trying to balance between being a soldier, a normal human being, but also being like a quasi messiah to these Arab tribes. And like that's where the story kind of was just taking like a kind of a lull for me. But again, like I will never forget. I wish I could bottle up the feeling that I had watching that first half of Lawrence of Arabia, because it was, I don't think another movie like it will make. I think the last time I felt like that was when I watched Dune 2 for the first time.
So maybe you are very similar to our titular Lawrence. Maybe it's just the desert that you're drawn to.
Honestly, it might be because a lot of like I really like I said, I really like Indiana Jones, or maybe it's like the ancient type of stuff. So like, there's a lot of ancient history like in Arab culture that they kind of tie to. And I don't know. I'm a sucker for like swashbuckling, horse riding, sword swinging adventure movies, dude. There's just something about it.
Camel riding in this case.
A lot of
Yeah.
camel riding, which
Um,
to be fair, I was reading on some fun facts about the movie, and apparently Peter O'Toole's butt kept bleeding while riding the camel because of how
wow.
uncomfortable it was. So he had to like every time you saw him riding the camel, he actually had like a couple sponges in his pants so it wouldn't. He was quoted saying, "I have a very delicate Irish ass." So yeah, I thought that was really funny. But then like while thinking about him riding the camel, just like he has this look on his face, like, yeah, I'd have that same face if my ass was bleeding.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jay-Z said it best when he was quoting The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Did I get that right?
Jay-Z said that.
Dark night feeling, die and be a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Yeah, he said it. He said it, but he was quoting The Dark Knight. Little
Okay.
Michael Scott.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. He did kind of say that.
But yeah, I mean, Lawrence, like in the beginning of the film, he's very green, right? Like he's not a very significant member of the British Army. But he's an intellectual. He is very already interested and involved in the Arab culture. So when he gets injected, into the Arab culture that he has read so much about and has come to admire from a philosophical level, I like the aspect of him trying to bring the tribes together, because a lot of the early portion of the movie focuses on the infighting between the Arab tribes. And how they're never going to defeat the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, if they don't come together and fight as one unit. So it's cool to see it being it's just Lawrence's role to get them to communicate and fight together at first. And then he really steps into it. And there's even conversation in the end, like, is he a national? Like, has he become an Arab essentially? By proxy, like is he disillusioned to the fact that he feels as though he genuinely belongs to the Arab culture and has for life?
You're talking about that that quote that Prince Faisal says when they're talking about the treaty.
Yeah,
he's like, oh, like he's pretty much an Arab.
Yeah, and there's a lot of comments similar to that are made throughout the third act of the movie. Some from the British general as well, who keeps promoting Lawrence. At one point, he says they think of him as a messiah, and I forget the other British officer's name. He was like the other main guy. Essentially, he was in charge before Lawrence got there, and the general had said they think he's a messiah, or he thinks that.
Yeah.
And then that's when we cut to Lawrence really having his struggles with identity and thinking that essentially the Arab people will jump when he says jump and duck when he says duck. And he struggles.
Or walk on water if he asks them to.
Yes, exactly. Is exactly what the conversation was. So I really like that there's a swap, and not to go on and be long-winded here, but at first, I mean, Lawrence is essentially a pacifist, and there's very little blood in the beginning of this movie, in the first, I would say, 2.5 hours. And then you get to the last hour, and there's so much death and so much violence and on-screen, violence to a degree. It's not graphic by any means, but far more than at first. Yeah. So I think you really kind of fall into that pit with Lawrence as the story goes on, which as much as I would say it wasn't that entertaining to really watch the story unfold, it was still powerful in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's from the beginning of the movie, like it's a culture shock that like you think you're going to be watching like this swashbuckling adventure of Lawrence uniting the Arab tribes to overthrow the Turkish encampment, and you think that that's what the movie's going to be, but then it becomes this war drama that like halfway, like when we got back to Cairo and we're talking, and I think it's like the first time that Lawrence comes back to the encampment after he has been fully engrossed in the Arab culture.
He has
that, like,
his robes and everything.
Yeah, and yeah, when he comes back with the robes for the first time, with Faraj, like after they had crossed the desert again, and he was like, "Get me 2 lemonades."
We want 2 large glasses of lemonade.
Yeah.
That I almost forgot that the British were even there because I was so focused on just like, what are these guys going to do next? Like they just took out an entire city armed to the teeth with like actual modern warfare with literally swords and horses. That's the type of stuff that...
Sorry to interrupt. This brings up an issue I kind of had with the movie, is that like 1 second they're approaching the city and the next second they've completely conquered it.
Well, you have that like sweeping shot of like,
yes, there's the one shot.
They kept talking about like the whole point was that they wanted to take Aqaba, but they couldn't. Like the only real way that you could was crossing the canal. But there's 2 giant guns pointing towards the ocean that they're saying like, oh, you can cross it from behind, like through the desert, and like obviously like it's impossible, it can't be done. But then literally you're watching it, like the horses, like the entire siege, go from left to right in one shot. Like you're literally watching the horses, like all
Yeah.
these real freaking horses sweep an entire city and essentially take it over. And I love how it ends with those two guns pointing at the ocean. But I mean, by that time, the city is pretty much overthrown. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's fair. I suppose. I guess we're kind of watching it all happen from afar, which is different, obviously, than seeing an extended battle scene kind of played out. And I understand that's not what this movie is. Like, this movie is not a fighting movie. It's not one that's going to glorify or embellish the atrocities of war.
yeah.
There was still a lot of embellishment that took place. While this is based on a true story, the Battle of Aqaba, this whole sequence is one of the more embellished facets of it. It was not as seamless as it was made to be in the movie. But yeah, you're right. The one shot was entertaining, was really well done.
So one thing about the Battle of Aqaba that I actually had pulled up here. It's funny that we mentioned it because again, like to Parker's point, this is all based on real events, like by T.E. Lawrence. Like the Battle of Aqaba was an actual real battle that happened during World War One. T.E. Lawrence and Peter O'Toole actually share similarities during their filming and, obviously live like interaction with the Battle of Aqaba, that they both were almost killed in the Battle of Aqaba. So T.E. Lawrence was nearly killed they were both almost killed by a camel. Funny
Oh,
enough,
wow.
that's the similarity here.
Peter O'Toole and
So
these camels.
that's what I'm saying, dude. Like Peter O'Toole just like then there's other things I can go about Peter O'Toole, but T.E. Lawrence was nearly killed when his camel threw him off of him after he accidentally shot it in the head. And then
Wow.
Peter O'Toole, while filming, was nearly killed by his camel. A gun or a rocket used to signal action in the first Aqaba take fired prematurely, and O'Toole was thrown by his panicked camel in front of a charging horse. But because the camel was obviously like a Hollywood trained camel, the camel actually like stood not on top of O'Toole, but like around him enough to where like the horses like would start running, but they would run around the camel. So Peter would not actually get trampled. So I thought that was just crazy that like his character and him almost suffered the same fate.
The fact that T.E. Lawrence accidentally fucking shot his camel in the head.
That's what I'm saying.
So
like,
absurd.
How do you?
I can just picture, like, you know how
so
Peter O'Toole is riding the camel, like holding the gun in both hands, and it looks so out of place. He's just like this, like la di da. Like,
but I mean that
that's
fits
what I
into his
picture.
character because like he even brings it up when he comes back here. He's like, I've killed two men. Like he just like that's just like good character development by Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, he did a really great job, and I mean, I think the acting in this movie was really good all around.
Especially by Alec Guinness, dude.
Yeah, Alec Guinness is as Prince Faisal, and I really think I'm trying to pull the name up here. Omar Sharif, who played Sharif Ali. Not only was the acting so good on Omar's part, but the character, I think we get next to T.E. Lawrence, we get the most character development from Sharif Ali, and the two kind of switch places because first off, Ali's introduction is one of the greatest scenes I think I've seen like in any movie. If you take that scene out of Lawrence of Arabia and just make it its own thing, like it's a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. And there's a lot of shots like that, but there's so much tension. Lawrence is with the Bedu guide, and they stopped at one of what's Sharif Ali's tribe's name? Hatit or something like that. But they stop at a well that they're not supposed to stop at. And Lawrence's Bedu gets killed. But first, you see this massive red fiery sun. Was it a sunrise? I don't know. The whole sky's red.
It was like
you see
it kind of was,
right
It was like in the middle of the day almost.
And like Felix had said earlier, the shot is so wide. You can tell, obviously, it's going to be limited by whatever screen you're watching on, but you can tell just the massive scale of the shot, and it really makes you feel the distance of the desert. And Sharif Ali's character, who you don't know who he is at this point, is perfectly centered as a black silhouette on the golden sun that's creeping into the frame of this hellish red sky and the white sand below it. And it's just so perfectly framed, and the colors are popping off the screen. And not only is it visually striking, but there's so much suspense because you don't know who this character is that's coming up. And it ends up being a massive shift in the story and a setting point for the tone, because the first interaction between Lawrence and Ali is essentially a discussion between pacifism and barbarianism, essentially. And Ali is saying that I will kill whoever drinks from my well that's not supposed to drink from my well. They're not supposed to be here. And Lawrence is saying, oh, well, you are both Arabs. Like, why you should be fighting against the Turks together. Like, you will never succeed by fighting one another. And then eventually, towards the end of the movie, it's a complete swap where Ali is trying to restrain Lawrence because he's turned into this violent individual that is out for conquest and to lead his people now to, a complete takeover. So it was awesome seeing that switch in character and switch in motive between the two. And the actors did an incredible job of portraying it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, when they're about to go, like towards the end of the movie, when they're about to take over Damascus and they're going through like that village that just got cleared out by Turkish encampment, Lawrence is ready, and he sees the Turkish encampment like leaving the village, and he's ready to just go and mess all of those people up with like this 2,000 man army. And even Ali is like, no, remember Damascus, like that's what we're here for. We need to go to Damascus. And after an instigation, where one of those village people goes and tries to fight them all on his own and gets shot, like then he's like, no, we need to mess these people up right now. And it's just, to your point, it's funny to see that switch between Ali and Lawrence. And again, like there's a lot of shots like that where it's, these wide aspects with just the silhouette in the middle, like when Lawrence goes back to try and save
Faraj. Is it
not Faraj?
The guy
Ghasim. Yeah, that his camel was there, but the guy wasn't. So he went back, and we see
he had fallen off his camel from sleeping.
Yeah, and then Daoud stayed to one of like the two like beggar boys stayed like to wait for Lawrence. And again, like we see that like tiny silhouette like progressively start to get bigger and bigger. But again, because of this wide aspect, it's just such a slimmer, but again, it creates that suspense. And I just thought, like, again, these shots were insane. Dude.
Yeah, there's so much eye candy in this film. Even when they're in Prince Faisal's tent, I felt it as though I could feel the softness of the tapestries that were inside of
well, like when we see Prince Faisal for the first time, like when they're all meeting together,
and the robes and tapestries and all of the Arab like design work that is on display when they first I forget where it is that they meet Faisal for the first time, but it's still so rich visually. And even though it's not this grand sweeping shot of the desert or of any landscape, it's like an interior scene, it still feels so rich on the eyes, and I was loving it. I remember thinking, like, on our scale, and we're going to discuss this when we rank, because there are two times where I felt that there was really bad green screen work or screen work of some kind.
I was like, green screen?
Yeah, well, hold on.
No, but I get what you're saying. Like matte painting work.
Yes, there's one scene where Lawrence is standing in an ocean after they take Aqaba, and the ocean water is literally vertical behind him, like it's a background.
I have to watch that again. I was watching that scene, but then it was like, I was still in awe of the shot that I had just watched, that I wasn't even trying to pick up on that. That was such a pristine and serene way to end that scene with just like you pretty much just watch this thing, like this movie or the Battle of Aqaba like almost started in the morning, and like as you're watching it, like you kind of see like almost time pass by to where it then ends like with a sunset, and like it was just like, dude, beautiful. So then I might have to watch that again, and now I'm going to be like, like it's ruined. I can see the water just.
I don't think that I'm gonna say that it didn't ruin it, because it's literally like 2 seconds out of a 3 hour and 45 minute movie that for the other 3 hours and 44 minutes and 40 seconds is amazing visually.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself that this is the standard for a 10 out of 10 for visual and auditory appeal, right? Like, and sure, a little bit of a spoiler, but that's why, like, I don't feel as bad putting movies at 8s and 9s that are still visually striking, that don't, because they don't reach this level. Like, I feel like we have the rating of 10 for a reason, to break out whenever there is a movie such as Lawrence of Arabia that is this visually rich.
And just like it feels so real. Like you don't like even when you watch like an example I was gonna bring up, like, and sorry that it ties in with this, but Return of the Jedi, when they first see Emperor Palpatine for the first time, and you're in that ship, and you see all of these stormtroopers around, like you literally think that like this room is filled with people, but it's actually just a giant matte painting that they then like, you know, imposed in front of the screen to make it look like it's big. Like they literally had the army of Jordan in the movie. Like they were just used as extras. Yeah.
I was thinking that because there are some scenes where there are like 500 people in the shot. It's insane. And they're all on camels.
The King of Jordan lent an entire brigade of his Arab legion as extras for the movie. So most of the film's soldiers are actually played by real soldiers.
That's awesome.
And like you feel that. Like I was trying to think of like, because I had that like Return of the Jedi trick in my mind. I'm like, how did they get all of these people here? It's because they literally brought all of those horses, all of those camels, all of those people. They're shooting on location in Morocco and Jordan. Like it's just, and we do not get movies like that anymore.
No,
like,
I mean, so many feats were accomplished to create this, and like you can definitely tell watching the movie, especially it being from 62. You're just like, wow, like they went through a lot
while using like pretty new technology with like the Panavision 70. Like it's almost like when you're trying to film like an IMAX now, like you're trying to figure out like what are the limitations and what are the restrictions for this new technology, while also trying to create this grand scale of a movie, which bringing back your point from Fanny and Alexander, because you gave that a 9 out of 10 because the visuals were amazing, but the music wasn't memorable. This soundtrack I was bumping for like 2 days straight, which like it's so good.
Yeah.
And it fits the tone of the movie and just everything you're watching. Like it's such a beautiful mesh of.
I even think I would go back and give it an 8 now because of what we're saying. And you know, we're about to move into the scale that the rating for this movie and talk about it, but the way that I approach these is still ever changing. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, over the course of 100 movies, how our scale kind of tends to change, because even on a scale of 1 to 15 or 1 to 10, when you're watching movies like Lawrence of freaking Arabia, it's hard to put it at anything less than 100%.
It's going to be hard for movies to top like at least like the visual aspect and production aspects for Lawrence of Arabia, because again, there are some things that I might have scored a little less about this movie, but it's going to be tough to top the visual aspect of Lawrence of Arabia.
And you know what? And you know, let's go ahead and move in. If you would like to, we can move into our ratings, but I think that where the visuals and the score and a lot of, you know, that type of stuff was incredible, there still was a lot left to be desired, in my opinion, from a character standpoint for some other characters. So you had mentioned the two beggar boys, for example, who both, spoiler alert, both die on screen. One from quicksand.
The movie's been out for long enough.
Yeah, yeah, literally. Go watch it. One dies from quicksand, and one dies from a detonator going off inside on him?
So the detonator goes off on him, and I think like it wounds him, but they mention like, you know what the Turks are gonna do to him if they catch him alive. So
right,
like,
so they don't leave wounded.
Mercy kills this dude, And oh, dude, Daoud is so sad. Daoud's death is heartbreaking. When they're walking through and he gets caught in the quicksand, and Lawrence is like throwing his cloth to try and get him to like come up. It just, dude, it sucked. That and Gazim's death, like when they get like the two tribes together and they see one person dies and they have the other person held down who shot him, and Lawrence is like, I'm a neutral member of this, like I will be the executioner, not knowing who this person is, and it's literally the dude who you risked your life to go out into the desert and rescue him, and now you have to kill this man. Like it
Yeah.
was
That
like
was
it
a
was
great,
moments
great
like that
moment.
where I'm like, it was a nice balance of like it's swashbuckling adventure, but also just like grounds itself in reality. Like
And in
it was
tragedy. Yeah.
it becomes a war drama like in the second act of the movie, which might have knocked it down for me because I was expecting it to just be like guns ho fun the entire 3 hours, but
Right.
then it could get stale after that. But it still made
Well,
it very interesting, like to watch Lawrence go from the highest peaks of like being almost essentially like the king of the Arabs at this point to now like he's human, like he's dealing with an identity crisis and dealing with, as I'm sure like before this, he's never seen violence, he's never seen war, he's always been stuck in his books and in his work at school, and now he is seeing the cruel realities of war.
yeah. The story became way more granular as we went on, because I agree. In the beginning, I thought it was going to be more gung ho, and you have the scene where the Turks are flying in their fighter jets and basically carpet bombing this encampment, this Arab encampment.
Yeah, that's where
You're
we
like,
meet Prince
wow, like
Faisal for the first time too.
right, and you think I remember thinking like that's like just an incredible scene in the sense of the dichotomy between the advanced weaponry of the Turks and what Lawrence and the Arabs have with literally swords on horseback. Like, and was it Faisal that kept saying fight, 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 as if, or was it
While that
Sheriff Ali?
was happening,
Yes, I think that
yeah,
might
it
have
was
been Ali.
Faisal.
Stand and fight! Stand and fight!
Yes, it was Faisal, and you just remember being sympathetic to that cause, thinking like, well, what are you gonna do, dude? Like, you gonna stick your sword up and try and clip the wing of a plane? And I remember thinking we were gonna get a lot more of that, but the story really does narrow its fork. It narrows its focus as we move on, and it becomes less about the war and the scene of what's going on, like in the big picture, and it becomes more about the personality crisis of Lawrence, which is fine, but I think was less entertaining for sure.
Well,
But
yeah, because you have like these sweep, like it's you go from having probably the most unique visual experience that I've ever seen, and then going to like more dialogue heavy like conversations. Like when we were going to Damascus, I was like, oh, we're gonna get this giant battle scene again, like it's gonna be like the Battle of Aqaba, and no, it's just they overtake the city like after they had killed this Turkish encampment, and now they're talking about what city is gonna have which of the Arab tribes is gonna have electricity now,
right,
like and how like what should be the involvement of the British Empire, and like how are the Arabs actually going to be free? Like, are they just going to have their free land, but over the watch of the British Empire? Like, it's
there's a
sad
lot
to
going
see.
on. Yeah, and it's all real. Like, I mean, this is based in history and based in facts. Like these are real problems that go on in wartime. I mean, you even see it like with Haiti, for example. I don't know why Haiti is what comes to mind first, but they have a successful slave revolt historically, right? And then they have successfully completed this completely unlikely conquest, right? And then from there is so much destabilization because there's no cohesive government system or
Yeah.
power system to continue to operate as a normal society. So you see the Arabs that are now going through this. They don't want the British involvement, but they also want their tribe to be the primary tribe. So there's a lot there that's at play. I wouldn't say that it's explored in detail or in depth, though, the
No.
solutions to these.
Yeah,
But
because that's not what this
it's not what
movie
it's
is
about.
trying to be. Like
Right.
it has those hints and bits and pieces, but it's just more like it's an adventure movie with a
Mhm.
little hint of war drama and just
Mhm.
like the effects of war on a person and misidentity. I mean, the movie literally starts with T.E. Lawrence dying
Yeah.
in the
You
first
almost
5
forget
minutes
about
of the
that, yeah.
movie.
And did you go
Because
back and
which is
rewatch that first
crazy
5
because
minutes? If you go
you
back
mean
and rewatch
after
the
the
first 5
overture?
minutes, yes, and you know who everyone is then in that scene, because when
Yeah.
the movie's opening, you don't know who these characters are that are saying, "Oh, did you know Lawrence? Like, how did you know him? What did you think of him?" And they all have an opinion to offer, even the people that only knew him tangentially. But when you go back and
Mhm.
watch it, you think, "Oh my gosh, like that's the other general, or that's the guy that he ran into, or that's the reporter, the American reporter that was
Yeah.
there with him for the second half of the movie." So it was fun going back and watching that first clip, which I did do.
I think it's crazy that the beginning of the movie started with T.E. Lawrence on a motorcycle, and the movie ends with a motorcycle overtaking the car that he's in going back home.
I did not even pick up on that. So that's right before he dies.
Yeah, he dies on a
Okay.
motorcycle.
Yeah,
So, like, he's
the ending
on
of the
yeah.
movie, I did not realize the ending of the movie was right preceding his death.
Which, to be fair, the end of the movie, I was kind of like, "Oh my god, wait, that's it?" I wanted to see more. I wanted to see Lawrence actually get home, but we're just kind of, like, left in suspense. But again, like, I literally was like, "Oh my god, look, a motorcycle." That's what he's
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
I was like, my movie brain is like, that's what happened at the beginning of the movie, like,
Yeah.
but this again, this movie had so much to offer. It was, I mean, obviously, from like how I've been talking about this film, it is easily like at least my favorite, and I'm hoping
Let's
that
go to the
the
rankings.
exactly we're gonna
But
these are what the rankings are gonna reflect. Shout out Alec Guinness,
yeah.
Mr. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
The guy from Lawrence of Arabia?
Yes, dude, that's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
What?
Yes, dude. I was trying
Dude,
to
that's
find like this.
crazy.
I was trying to find a way to like plug that in because I didn't know if you knew that, but I was like, there's no natural way that we had so far. But yes, Alec Guinness
So we
is
mentioned that
Obi Wan
fucking
Kenobi.
Peter O'Toole's in Ratatouille, but not that.
Exactly. But I knew that going into it. I'm like Alec Guinness. Like I'm like, yeah, that's literally that's fucking Obi Wan Kenobi. Like, but all right, going into our rankings. We're gonna do this a little differently this time. So if you've been watching the other episodes, we kind of go our own rankings first. Like I would go into mine, and then Parker would go into his. But I think it might just or well, Parker did. This was his idea. It's a little more engaging if we did each topic like together. So like I would say mine, and then we kind of discuss. Parker would say his, and we kind of switch back and forth from there. So we're gonna do that today because it's our show and we can do whatever the hell we want. So in terms of enjoyability and rewatchability, I personally I would watch this movie so many more times. Like I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, the visual aspect, the score, the acting, the story about it. Like I I went ahead and gave this a 13 out of 15. I would watch this movie. It wouldn't be like Dark Knight levels, like, I wouldn't go and watch this movie as many times as I did with Dark Knight, but I could go back into this movie and still have a good time watching it versus, like, going back and seeing Fanny and Alexander, like,
That's a
or
very high
s
score, 13.
I'm aware.
That's so good for you. That's awesome. I did not feel the same way. I did enjoy watching the movie. So it gets those points, but I wouldn't say that it's something that I'm going to be super eager to revisit. Unlike Fanny and Alexander, which is ironic. We both have differing opinions there, but I gave Lawrence of Arabia a 7 out of 15 for enjoyability and
Oh my
rewatchability.
god.
I think that it was enjoyable. I don't think I can see myself just kind of putting this on and enjoying it again though. Like I think I need to give it some time before I would give it another watch. It's not as digestible as like you mentioned, Indiana Jones. Like if I'm in the mood for something like similar to this, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
put on Raiders. Like or
And that's
or,
fair. I mean,
or
Raiders
something
is like
similar.
it's like you said, it's easier to chew. Like there's not a lot of like there's not so much thinking you have to do and not so much
Right.
like
And not so much like, yeah, it's gorgeous. You know what, how I would revisit it as a coffee table book of the shots in this film. That's how I would like to
that's
revisit it.
fair.
What'd you think of the story? If you
Well,
enjoy it,
I'll
tell me
let
that.
you go into the story first. We'll kind of just go like ha 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 ha. Ha. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that there were some really good moments. Like name is escaping me again, but the guy that Lawrence ends up having to kill after saving him,
Gazim.
Gazim, is a really great story moment. Um, I think the development of Sheriff Ali is a really good, story. And I think that the broad aspects at play are a good, like it's all a good story. Um, but I feel like it misses some really like intimate moments that I'm looking for in any given film. Um, so I gave it an 11 out of 15, which still a good score, but I would hesitate to put it up any higher than that because it didn't really stick to my brain a whole lot. Um, but I thought it was really well done, objectively speaking.
Yeah, I kind of agreed with you on that. I gave it a 12 only because like again, the story is something we're somewhat familiar with, but it's a story that's kind of timeless for a reason. It's like foreign person immerses themselves in foreign like culture and gets engrossed in it, but there's sort of like a twist that like, you see movies like Pocahontas, Avatar, Dune, like that they get immersed in this culture and they become a part of it and want to fight for it and it kind of comes off in like a positive manner. Whereas like with this one, he's going that route, but then it kind of takes like a darker turn where he's like he's not enriching the culture, he's kind of poisoning it almost.
Right.
So like he's using it for his own benefit. So that's the part of the story that I thought was interesting and kind of pushed it a little bit more in my score. So that's why I went and gave that a 12 out of 15.
Yeah, it definitely
Last
gives you a lot to think about. So
exactly because I mean again I went like I heard like all of these comments about what the movie is like and I'm like all right like I kind of know what to expect and it blew my expectations. Um, Going into lasting impression, I gave that a 13 out of 15. This movie, again, we're very sad. We're very blessed to have like a lot of large format media now where like almost everything is filmed in IMAX now. So like we get a lot of these like grand aspects and we're used to it. But watching this, like even on like my 4K like TV at home, like it still felt big. It still felt like what you were looking at could probably just pop out of your television and just keep going. Like you were immersed in the setting that you were in, and it's just I had not seen anything like that before. So that's why I left that with a 13 out of 15. The story aspect of it, these characters, and just the visual aspect of it, which will feed into my next score, pushed that a lot.
yeah, wow. Movie is already scoring very high for you. So that's
Dude,
good. Lasting impression, I put it at a 10 out of 15. I agree with you. Like visually, there's a lot that's going to stick with me. I think it's hard. Like watched this movie like pretty recently, so I'm kind of predicting how much it will continue to stick with me. But now, like 2.5 days out, essentially, I would say I'm thinking about it brain wise, but it's not like weighing on my heart. And in order for me to score it like even higher and lasting impression, like I want it to have an intellectual and an emotional impact on me moving forward. And right now, I definitely feel like I'm chewing on it, like in my brain. But there
yeah.
wasn't a whole lot of emotional, hard hitting nature to this film
Mhm.
that
Like
continues.
it's not something that's gonna stick with you like after we watch like our next movie. You don't think?
Right, right. So,
No, I get that.
but still, obviously what it did in terms of movie making and like the things that were done in order to create it definitely place it in history. And again, when we're talking about any movie on this list, like that's probably going to be the case. I still
And I
think
feel like that feeds into both of our scores for visual and auditory appeal.
yeah. So I think we'll probably both have this at a 10 for visual
Yeah.
and auditory appeal. But yeah, I mean, this is a master class in like how to make a movie look good. Like my eyes were just glued to the screen in some moments. And like I said earlier, like this is really the standard. This is why I don't always feel bad about rating movies in certain categories a couple of points under the top, because there's always going to be a movie that does it to the degree that Lawrence of Arabia does visuals and audio. And even the score, like you mentioned, the score complemented the visuals in such a good way that we don't always see. So yeah, the gold standard, in my opinion. It was freaking awesome.
And what I think I liked a lot about the score, just kind of diving into that, was that it, when you get into like desert movies, like you kind of are expecting like you're gonna get some sitars, you're gonna get some sort of like Middle Eastern like instrumentation in it, and it's kind of like it's what we're used to, so that's just what you're hearing for. And it wasn't that at all. It was very like it was giant, like sweeping orchestras, like almost like John Williams-esque, like just grand instrumentation that didn't really include a lot of like Middle Eastern instrumentation, but it did have themes of the Middle East, like there's certain scales that they used like for it that made you feel like you were watching a swashbuckling adventure, but then also bringing you into the desert with some of the themes. And I just thought, just like the reoccurring theme throughout the movie, like it's hopefully like after this, it will still continue to be like a score that I will come back to and listen to, and it will bring me back to that moment of watching the movie. And it just the 10 speaks for itself, dude.
Yeah, and I think they knew too when to not go heavy-handed with the music, because there are some quiet moments in the movie, and that helps to amplify the visuals again. So it wasn't super persistent to the point where you grow tired of it whatsoever.
It was a good balance of it.
And it really was an epic score. Like it really helped add to the epic nature of the movie, like you said. So how'd you feel about the pacing?
So that's where my lowest score goes into play. I actually gave the pacing an 8 out of 10. Only because again, like I want to kind of take my expectations out of this, but I was expecting this to be just like a swashbuckling adventure like throughout. And then when I feel like we got to like the intermission and I didn't know what to expect after that, but then all of a sudden Lawrence blows up a fucking train that I'm like, all right, we're jumping right back into this. It's going to be awesome. And then all of a sudden we're now in the war drama and like personal aspect of it, which it's still great, but I feel like it was very jarring, like going from like this action adventure to then now he is like losing his mind, and we're kind of losing less and less of the action portion of it, and we're getting smaller scenes, we're getting more scenes of just dialogue. And that's where I feel like the pacing just kind of like it took like a big dive almost. Like it just kind of was just like, okay, now we're here. Like most of the adventure, like it's over. And that could obviously be due to like budget reasons. I'm sure like they spent a shit ton of money on the first act of this movie. And then going towards the end, they were like, oh, well, we have to shoot this other part then. We don't need 1,600 horses and 1,600 camels for this part of the movie. But what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the pacing did go downhill a little bit towards the end of the movie after the intermission, which, like I mentioned, the intermission is so late in this movie. Like you have 2.5 hours, and then you basically have a pseudo sequel that takes place in the third act. At least that's kind of how I viewed it in my eyes, and probably even more so for you because you separated your watches depending on the intermission.
Yeah,
like, did it feel like
definitely
you were
felt
back
like
to
I
a
was
different movie almost?
Yeah, literally until Lawrence blew up a fucking train, and then I was like, okay, like
Yeah,
when
all right,
they're like when the intermission comes back to like Prince Faisal and the reporter like just kind of talking, I'm like, oh, are we like back in the present now? Like Like, are they just like talking about Lawrence again? Like, what's going on? And then it jumps to the train. I'm like, oh, okay, we're back. But then after that, it just comes back to just a lot more dialogue, and it just
Yeah, it felt meandering at times. I think that there were definitely some dips. I gave it a 7 out of 10 in pacing. And I would say I'm probably closer to a 6 than I am to an 8, but a 6 didn't really feel right because I still think for the length a lot was told, and I did feel like the length was justified for the most part.
Mhm.
And I really didn't mind any of the non-plot moments because they were so beautiful to look at. So it
Exactly.
still helped to carry the movie along because I was still visually interested. So yeah, I think a 7 out of 10 it goes well there. I think for acting, I want to give it a 10 because there was nothing that I disliked about any of the performances. Wow, if I could give it a 9.5, I really would. I want to hear. I know that I should be giving my score right now, but I want to hear yours first. Maybe it'll help me make up my mind.
So I gave it a 9
Okay.
only because again, like I feel like a 10 would be like a performance not just by one person, but like an ensemble of people that truly just made me like one immersed and two just like took my breath away. Like
Mhm.
I can't like really I want to try and pinpoint like an ensemble cast that did that would make me give it a 10 out of 10, but right now I can't really think of it.
Maybe you think maybe
If I
like
sat down and
the Departed? Would you think?
I would say that, or like maybe even like The Godfather, but I've
Right.
again, like I haven't
Okay.
watched those movies in forever.
Sure.
Like Peter O'Toole, fantastic. He acted his freaking butt off in this movie
Everyone was really good.
while also not being the first choice to play T.E. Lawrence. Like Marlon Brando was in talks to play him too, but he turned it down. And this was like one of his first major roles too. So just he gave it his all. And I mean, Omar Sharif, Alec Guinness, Anthony Quinn playing Auda Abu Taye. He is like the leader of like the bigger tribe that they come into contact with. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. All of them were incredible. It just there wasn't anything that like they were good in their own right, but together just like it didn't give me something to warrant it to be a 10 out of 10. And I mean, shout out to Peter O'Toole, but Omar Sharif stole that movie. He was so good.
Yeah. You know what? I think tell me if this sounds stupid, but I feel like I would need to see other movies with these actors to really determine. Um,
Like Ratatouille.
yeah, no. But
No.
like you said, I think everyone did an outstanding job on the film. I wouldn't say there was
Mhm.
any part of it that took me out of it. I think
And now that you mentioned that, that is like I agree with that because again, like what we were talking about, this was my first Alec Guinness movie besides Star Wars, and that's watching him, like, obviously, like, I knew who it was based off of the billing, which he had
mhm.
top billing for some reason, and he was in the movie for, like, 20 minutes out of the 3.5 hours, but it didn't I kept thinking that it was Obi-Wan Kenobi, like, you could just hear him talking, and I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like I need to watch another Alec Guinness
you're right.
movie to
You're
kinda
right.
take me out of that mindset of, like, okay, that's Sir Alec Guinness. Like,
I feel like just the fact they had him playing like an Arab prince too, like, yeah, like definitely dude's acting, like he's definitely acting. But
yeah.
does it take
Like,
away from
I'm
the
glad that they put
authenticity?
Omar Sharif as Sheriff Ali, and
I'm
I
gonna give
think,
it a
like
9. I'm gonna give it a
go
9.
for it.
Because yeah,
And then
everyone was so
Anthony
great, but I don't I feel like in order to give it a 10, like how we did for visual and auditory appeal, like in order to give it a perfect score, like you have to be damn sure. And that's why
it
I'm
has
giving
to
it a
set
9.
the bar for what the rest of the list is going to be. Like,
Right.
every other movie in terms of visual and auditory appeal has to be a Lawrence of Arabia to get a 10 out of 10.
Right. That's gonna come back to bite us in the ass.
I don't think it will. I feel like really the only and again, there's a lot of movies on this list, but I feel again, like I will continue to say it, like the only movie that I could only ever see this being like that big in scale would probably be Dune. And I know you haven't seen it
Predators.
yet, but it's there's a lot it just oh eat
Sorry,
shit.
have a spider in my throat.
That's
What
nice.
did you give Lawrence of Arabia for suspension of disbelief?
So I gave that a 9 out of 10. Only be like, again, this movie, because of the visuals, like in this it leaves you in this world and you are immersed in it for the 3 hours and 47 minutes that you're in it, and it doesn't let go. That's why I gave it a 9 out of 10. I don't know why. I don't know what's keeping it from giving it a 10. I don't know what other aspects, but you know what? I'm
This,
gonna
this
go
can be a very
crazy.
difficult category to
I
judge.
feel like this going in hand with what I'm saying with the visual and auditory of it, I'm gonna give it a 10. Just I'm gonna go and commit and just say that because of the visuals, it never made me feel like I wasn't there,
Okay,
if
that's
that
fair.
makes any sense.
Yeah, I give it a 7 because I think that there were definitely just moments that I found to be a bit jarring in terms of the location of the characters that we're watching. I mean, like, I get that a lot of this did happen and the circumstances surrounding the actual historical events were unlikely, but I felt, and maybe I need to do a bit more research just on the actual historical accuracy of the film. To my understanding, it's very loosely based on the character of T.E. Lawrence, and I think that you can tell watching the movie because they are literally in the middle of the desert and then back in Britain or wherever the base was that they were staged. They were in Damascus, the British officers, but I felt as though there was a lot of jumping around that did not make sense to me. And even talking about it now, I'm like, I don't know if this is a issue for me or an issue for the movie, but I had difficulty just kind of following how they were getting from these places so quickly. But
I mean, I get that, honestly.
is
You know
that
what?
would you say that's a valid argument or it didn't?
No, I actually think that is a valid argument, and that actually, to that point, I'm gonna leave it with a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
because you picked that out of my brain of, like, I'm trying to figure out what it is, but yeah, like, I couldn't really tell where
But
we
there
were when we
it's not just
weren't
the
in
fact
the
that they're
desert.
right, but they get there and they're, like, the exact same, like, where and, like, state. It's almost like they walked straight out
Yeah,
of the desert into the British base at times. I'm like,
except
"Wait a second."
when except when Lawrence comes back, what goes back to the base for the first time, where he is literally like, he had this white gown and now it's just covered in dirt. He
Right,
has like
right.
a 5 o'clock shadow, and like that's the part where I'm like, okay, like I could believe that this man crossed a desert with this kid and watched another kid die, but then other aspects, I'm like, yeah, like how did he get back, and
And
why
also
is
the
his
raids.
back, or no, when he after he gets his back whipped by the Turkish encampment and he's going to talk to the gov like
Mhm.
the generals or whatever, why is his back just starting to bleed at that moment? Like, how is your back just not just drenched in blood after you got absolutely spanked by these Turkish, like,
Yeah, I
it's
I
crazy.
like I really liked that scene though, and we're running a little bit longer than usual, but hey, it's Lawrence of Arabia. We're talking about it's a long movie, so
Correct.
it's justified. But early on, when it's like the first scene of the movie, and Lawrence is painting on the map, and he puts the match out with his fingertips, and he essentially says, "Mind over matter." Right? Like the trick is not minding that it hurts, and you see him live by that code so frequently throughout the movie where he's just like, fuck it, like let's just do it. Let's go do it. And you see it
Yeah.
explicitly in that scene where he's getting whipped and he's not really reacting to the pain. And you see
Mhm.
that mentality kind of shine through again. So I like that they
Yeah.
revisited that and use that as a justification for the decisions that his character makes throughout the movie. I thought it was a really good little hint in the first scene.
That's fair. That's a really good
Um,
point.
but yeah, I wanted to also mention the battles because I mean, I understand if there's an underdog story and they go in and they actually take Damascus, and they fought hard. But I feel like I didn't see like really how they did that because they hype
Correct.
up they hype up how much of an underdog they are. and then you flash
And they
forward
hype up Damascus so hard.
Right.
Like, even to the point where, like, after they took out, like, that small, like, Turkish encampment, that there's literally a sign pointing towards Damascus, and we are left thinking, like, "Oh my god, here we go. We're gonna go to Damascus, we're gonna get this crazy fight," and it's just not
Yeah.
really anything.
There is no real, like, epic battle scene. You don't see how they overtake the advanced
You pretty
military
much just
features.
jump to, like, when they're all, like, in that room, like, trying to figure out,
Yes.
"Alright, we took Damascus, what are we gonna do now?" Like,
So that's why I gave it a 7 because I feel like it skipped over some moments that were probably expensive to shoot, but also just I would have liked to seen them play out or at least have a little bit
correct.
more of an explanation.
All right. So with that originality, I went and gave this a 9. Again, just like going back to, like, we've heard this story before, but we haven't heard it, or at least I haven't seen it portrayed like this in terms of the story, in terms of the visuals, like in terms of just the grand scale. Like, I could not picture a bigger movie that came out of that era. And I don't really think that we're ever going to get a movie like Lawrence of Arabia. So I think, like, it kind of stands in its own right as its own thing, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I also gave it a 9, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like, it does very much so stand as this is Lawrence of Arabia. Like, you have this idea and this perception of the film before you even know what it's about. Like,
Mhm. I mean, I was even talking about it, like, earlier when we were doing this podcast, that, like, I've always talked about, like, you don't get grand scope movies like Lawrence of Arabia, but that's before I even watched the movie, but it has that reputation of being this larger than life experience. So,
yeah, I
and
will
even
say
after watching it, we still think that, and it's the reason why.
I do think that, and obviously you can tell an original story that's based off of real events. Like, that is
Yeah,
possible, and I think that they do that. However, I feel conflicted as to whether I want to bump it to an 8 just because of, again, some of the liberties that have been taken, but I feel like I've bumped down enough on it for that reason that I wouldn't want to take another point away, like, from the originality category, because
exactly.
it does achieve so much in that, right? So,
Mhm. So
what's your
what is your
attachment?
attachment? No, I
I'll
wanna
go
know
first.
you first.
Mine's a 2. Mine is a 2. Um,
Oh, okay.
which is not bad. Like, that's, like, I would say what I default to is probably a 2. Like, a movie that I watch and I appreciate, but um yeah, it is not something that I'm gonna, like, go out whenever I am talking to someone who's also interested in movies. Like, I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, what do you think of Lawrence of Arabia?" It's like, you know,
It's
I don't
not
know.
something you'd include in your top 4.
Yeah, it's not something that I felt was super personal to me. So 2 is not bad, but that's where I'll leave it.
Well, then, yeah, I gave it a 3 just because, again,
What?
this movie.
I was
Yeah.
expecting a 4 or a 5 out of you.
So, like, but that's the thing, like, I like, to your point, and honestly, I did have it on a 4 on my review, but to your point, like, the attachment score, it's something that, like, it sticks with you personally. Like, it's something that you will continue to go back to, and it's something that inspires you. It's something that, like, it's like movies that, like, you're an actor, like, you're actively in the business. Like, there are movies that you look back on that you can pinpoint and say, this movie made me want to pursue my dreams and go be in the movies, or this movie
Yeah,
made me want to become a musician. Like, this movie made me
right.
want to do this or that. Like,
Yeah,
this as
even
much.
not pertaining to the film industry, like, some movies you'll just leave, like, think when I saw Civil War, I left feeling differently about things.
So with the scores, and after just our general discussion, it averages out to a 79 for Lawrence of Arabia.
Wow.
So with that, it does put it at the first slot. So with Lawrence of Arabia as number 1 with a 79, Fanny and Alexander at a 76, Sunset Boulevard at number 4 with 74, and Sherlock Jr. at 71 at dead last.
Wow, I mean,
Which
it's crazy they've all been in the 70s so far. It's only been 4 movies.
I really thought Lawrence of Arabia was gonna push 80s, dude, but I knew it was going to take the number 1 spot, but I thought the score was going to be much higher.
Yeah.
But again,
I mean,
know
you said it best. I look at these 4 titles and I look at 70, 70, 70, 70, and I'm like, these guys are idiots, right? But you said it best. Who cares? It's our freaking ratings, right?
Exactly. And I mean, there's going to be movies where Parker is going to enjoy the shit out of it, and I'm going to be like, I did not like this movie at all.
And we haven't really had that yet. I don't think there's been. I think that this is a good list. Like, I wouldn't argue with it. I personally enjoyed Fanny and Alexander more than Lawrence of Arabia, but this is definitely how I think that the top 2 are definitely in a tier above the bottom 2, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. So. I don't know, man. I really liked Sherlock Jr. a lot more than Sunset Boulevard, which I'm surprised that it's still not dead last.
Yeah, I did enjoy it more too, but I guess that goes to show like we're trying to put a little bit of objectivity and a little bit of subjectivity in there. More subjectivity, of course, because it's our personal rankings, but on the number scale, like you never know what might happen. So
exactly. But
we're about to have our top 5.
With that, correct. And we're putting Lawrence of Arabia up in the rafters, and we are returning to the wheel. We are here. It is happening. And I've already said a movie, so maybe that might speak it out into the universe, but I don't think so.
We've actually said a couple of different movies. We've mentioned The Godfather, we've mentioned Empire Strike Back, Spider-Verse. So I don't think it will be any of them. I did. I coughed it when I said visual and auditory appeal.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's fair.
You'll hear it in the edit.
All right. Well, we're here. We are going to spin the wheel, and we're going to see
so many movies on that thing.
There's still 96 movies on here, dude.
Crazy.
It's going to be
all right. Let's see it. Let's see it.
Let's do it.
It's my favorite part of the week.
What is it looking like? A separation.
2011.
Well, it's modern.
All right, run us through this. I've never heard of this movie.
All right, so I'm looking at it right now. Hang on. A separation. I need to spell separation correctly. I haven't heard of this either. All right, so A Separation. It's looking like it's an Arabic movie. So funny that we just watched Lawrence of Arabia. Ugly Truth, Sweet Lies. A married couple are faced with a difficult decision to improve the life of their child by moving to another country or to stay in Iran and look after a deteriorating parent who has Alzheimer's disease. This sounds like a fun movie.
This is going to be draining.
This is
what else is the director
after watching Lawrence of Arabia, where you're living your highs and you're like, wahoo, horses, swords, let's go. And now it's just real life.
I mean, it's a 2 hour and 3 minute movie, so finally some normalcy.
That's fair. Directed by Asghar Farhadi.
He's also directed some other movies. I think we've already talked about. Click on his name.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe not. Maybe not.
There is I have heard of Everybody Knows. That's Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz.
Interesting. Okay.
I haven't seen it, but I have heard
nothing about this movie.
I don't either, but here we are.
All right. So at the time of us making this list, this was the 71st ranked film. Is that correct?
77th.
This list it continues to move. It's community based. So
yeah,
I mean, Lawrence of Arabia could have moved up and down.
Is a snapshot of basically mid 2024. What was it, June, that we took the snapshot of the Letterboxd list?
I think so, yeah.
So it's going to continue to change and move. And maybe once we get through 100, we can watch the ones that were added. I don't know. Something like that.
Well, that's it. Well, we got 95 more movies to go, dude.
We got a while to go. But obviously, it would be impossible to do this task with an ever-changing list because it just wouldn't be feasible.
It would never get done.
Right. So, was 77 is now 79. Okay,
because
so
I think we had Silence of the Lambs on our list.
That's only a 2-spot jump. That's only a 2-spot jump.
Exactly.
So awesome. I'm excited.
Me too. So Other than that, again, it's always a pleasure to go and talk movies with you. I can't wait to watch A Separation. We're gonna see where we go from there. But where can people find you, Parker?
Number one place that you can find me would be on Letterboxd, Parker_Paget. It's almost Halloween season, baby. So check out
Yes,
Spooky Senders.
sir.
Check out the Spooky Senders podcast. We've got a big episode that's about to drop, going over our hype list for the upcoming Halloween Horror Nights houses. So I don't know if there's a crossover between you movie fans and Halloween Horror Nights fans. And come to think of it, this episode is going to be dropping after Horror Nights has already started. But
Pretty much, yeah.
you know what? Who cares? Check it out anyway. You might like it.
Exactly. Go get stocked up on Ecto Cooler. Drink it with the Spooky Senders boys. The podcast is so fun. I love Horror Nights, and they love it 10 times more than I do. So they know their stuff. Go check them out. It's really great. You can find me on Letterboxd as well, ETZIO911. You can also follow the LetterBros official Letterboxd account, and you can also follow us on YouTube and on Instagram. And if you're listening to this, because I mean, why would you not want to see our faces? But here we are. Please go and like us 5 stars and just review the podcast. It means a lot to us. It lets us know what we're doing right and what, we think we could be doing better. But other than that, Parker, I will see you at the movies.